because they're going to be helping out with our presentation today. Carmen, could you introduce yourself?
Hi guys, my name is Carmen Roman. I am a family resource specialist at the Peel Center. I am also a parent. My daughter has been diagnosed with auditory processing disorder and autism, and she's currently in transition. I am Hispanic, black hair, and wearing glasses today. Typically I have my contacts, but today I wear my glasses.
Thank you. Natalie?
Hi, everybody. My name is Natalie Sines, and I am the training coordinator at the Peel Center, and I am also a parent. I have 3 kids, and I live in the Westchester area. And my first kid has a disability. She has Down syndrome, and she is 14 years old. A description of myself, I am a middle-aged also woman. I'm Hispanic. I have dark hair, wavy hair. I wear glasses, red rim, and I have a blurred background in the back.
Dylan?
Hi, everyone. My name is Dylan Altmaier. I'm the other training coordinator here at the Peel Center. To describe myself, I'm a Caucasian male, have a pink shirt on, glasses, and I also have a blurred background. I live in the Pittsburgh area, and coming up through school, I had disabilities and health challenges that I navigated.
Thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate that. So Carmen is going to run the slides today. I'm going to start, and then she's going to take over the middle, and then I'm going to finish up. The topic today is transition from early intervention, pre-K early intervention to kindergarten. Some strategies for families. Next slide. So some things that we do, since we're a pretty small group, it's good always to keep yourself muted unless you want to speak, but you can, and you can use chat to make comments or ask questions, but you can also unmute yourself if you like, since we are a small group, if you have an opening to ask a question as well, or if we're discussing a certain point. We ask that you don't disclose personal details just because we are recording it. At the end of this, we're going to turn off the recording for questions so that your questions won't be recorded. And let us know if you are having trouble understanding, for instance, it's hard to find it sometimes, how to access subtitles. All right, so let's move on. So the mission of the Peel Center is really to educate and empower all families to make sure that children, youth, and young adults with disabilities and special health care needs lead the active, rich lives that we want them to lead as full members of their schools and communities. So that is our mission, and that's what we do every day. Next slide. Wonderful. So we have objectives, and what we're hoping for you guys is that, you know, when you're done with this, you'll be able to talk about differences between the eligibility for special education in early intervention and the school age programs. So there are differences in eligibility between those 2 programs. To understand options for developing an IEP as a child transitions, right, from early intervention to that school age program. And really just in the end, we're going to wrap up with talking about how to be an informed decision maker. So how do we make sure that our children are getting placed the way we know will maximize their inclusion, their participation, right, their success with their typically developing peers. So that hopefully that'll be a good, rich discussion. Next slide. So I want to ask you a question, since we do have a small group. Please feel free to just, you know, either pop it in chat or unmute yourself and tell us. So how much do you feel like you already knew? This is probably a good chat response. How do you feel like you already know? How much do you already know about your child's school? Okay, I see very little, some. Okay, some. A little. Okay, this is good to know. There's a lot to know about it, isn't there? And going into it without having a lot of knowledge can feel really scary. I really appreciate the fact that you shared this with me. So we're going to proceed on with the knowledge and the understanding that there's a lot to know, and we're interested in finding out about it. Carmen, we can go to the next question. I can just ask it too. We did come out of the slideshow, Carmen. My second question to you guys is, what are the things that you're worried or you might be most concerned about in your child's new classroom in kindergarten? So I offered some examples here. There may be things that you're worried about that aren't on this list, but what are some of the main things on your mind when you think about moving to kindergarten? So proper supports. Okay, so right, that's absolutely central, isn't it? All of the above, making sure the supports are in place, right? And what might those look like, and deciding as a team how to implement them. Okay, Jessica's talking about following a 504 plan. Okay, and that's such an interesting, it's a slightly different topic. Well, we can point you to resources for, but yes, following the plan. And that she's and Danielle says, a full participant, and that my child is fully included. And that is really at the heart of how we know our children are going to be okay when they're fully included. And supports are what they need to be included. We can't just make a goal that said that they will be included and then expect them to be included. We have to do things to make that happen. And I love it that Natalie says, making sure that my child is seen as a whole child, was seen, because her daughter was in kindergarten sort of a long time ago now. Carrie is talking about how to account for what is missed in the early regular ed class when your child is pulled out for supports. Absolutely. And how can that be addressed in the IEP? So these are all really important things to talk about, and hopefully we'll be hitting on them in the course of our presentation today. And questions that are not answered, go ahead and make sure you save them for when we're done, in case we don't get to them, and then you can ask them again. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we're going to start with the basics. I'm going to put in the chat somewhere where. Okay, so we're gonna talk a little bit about the differences between the two systems. We're going to talk about things that can be done to prepare for transitions, and some of the nuts and bolts about what has to be done, so the procedures. And the last part of it, we're going to talk about prioritizing inclusion and what that might look like. Okay, next slide. Oops. So, oops.
It went too fast on me. Sorry, I apologize.
Yeah, that's okay. It can be twitchy. Yeah, so as you probably know, in preschool, a child can be eligible based on parameters around developmental delay. So 25% delay or 1.5 standard deviation, and as described in Pennsylvania, and needs specially designed instruction. Next slide. When we move into kindergarten and school age, it's slightly different. So children become, oh, I'm sorry. So before I get into that, here are the IDEA. IDEA stands for those of you that don't know, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which is a law that we're going to talk a little bit more about, that mandates, it's a nationwide mandate that children with disabilities are included in public education. But here are the categories of disability that are used. And I won't read them all to you. And as a whole, they're pretty broad. They don't include everything, but they're meant to be relatively broad. Okay, next slide. In school age, we describe their eligibility as two-pronged. So they qualify, so the idea of developmental delay kind of goes away. And a student qualifies under one of the categories of IDEA disabilities that we just looked at, and this is an important and, demonstrates a need for specially designed instruction. And we'll talk a little more about what that is in a minute. So in order to become eligible, and you guys probably know this too, it's pretty much, it's not so different at school age than it is in preschool. In preschool, the timeline is the same. The evaluation has to be completed within 60 days of the parent, after parent permission is received. In preschool, students are reevaluated every 2 years. And in school age, the mandate is that they have to be reevaluated every 3 years, and that students with an intellectual disability are reevaluated every 2 years. Okay, next slide. And again, the differences in the IEP have more sort of in common than they are different. So they are done annually. In preschool, it's a 12-month program. So there's 12-month plans that are made for preschool. IEP is over a 12-month period, and school age programming is for the school year, with the options or considerations for extended school year or ESY. And there are different ways that children become eligible for the extended school year. And we have resources to share if you have questions about that. The age in which they can enter services in preschool EI is on their 3rd birthday. And then for school age, it's really a little more dependent on the district. Compulsory age in Pennsylvania is 6 years. In Pennsylvania, kindergarten is still not required. So we call it in Pennsylvania the age of beginners. The compulsory age is the age of beginners, and includes kindergarten. It's really the language, the legal language that's used. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I'm going to toss it over to Carmen for the next session. Next section.
All right, guys. So now that you already know the IDEA basics and what it's really an evaluation and what they're looking for in order for your child to be eligible, we have to prepare for transition and a big piece of item to that school, whether it's at kindergarten or 6 years old. EI entity must send you a notice a year in advance about the need to transition to your program, or charter school if you have chosen for your child to go to a charter school instead of the regular public school, and schedule a transition meeting by the end of February to select school placement. So I have a quick question for you guys. Please feel free to share or mute yourself. Have you received notice of your transition meeting? If those who are already in that part of the process. I have a couple of yeses. That's interesting. I can tell you that for my daughter now is 16, and I never have received through through and through on her IEP plans, any transition letters from my school district. So the answers may vary depending upon the family and school district. So I'm very happy that you guys did receive it, and the LEA is doing the corresponding procedure. But sometimes parents do not get those transition letters and that documentation. So what
We
are
have a
some
few
of
more
the options?
answers coming in, Carmen. I'm sorry. I just
Oh.
wanted to, you know.
That is awesome. So I have a couple of no's. No, but will not start until 24-25 school year. So this is a good preamble for you to keep an eye on that document. And I have another one, no, fighting the school for admission for my son and my older daughter. They want to schedule right before school starts. That's interesting as well. So what are some of the options that we have as your child transition in the school system? A child remains eligible for school age special education if they are eligible for special education in preschool early intervention. So that eligibility must be there. Registered with your school district or charter school, whatever your choice has been. Now, the child may not be able to have an option unless the reevaluation determines that that child is no longer eligible for special education. And that should be done by the district or the charter school or the preschool EI program. And if you are not in agreement with that, that's when we go back to the school district for additional evaluation if needed be, if you do not agree with that decision from either the preschool or from the school district. I think I have a comment here. Great job getting ready with knowledge ahead of time. Oh, that was Natalie. Collaborating with districts, you have three options. And our approach as a parent, and I can tell you this by personal experience, is always to create a team for your child, right? It starts with you as a parent. You know your child the best, right? Because you're that constant person that the child has in their life, and who's going to know them better than you as a parent. But you also are going to need a team that are equipped with things that we may not be equipped ourselves, right? I remember when I first walked into the special education system, even though I have gone to school and all of that, I felt so ill-equipped to help my child because I didn't know the law, I didn't know the services, I didn't know the resources. So here I am with a little girl that it's not hearing properly, and all of these documentations start throwing at me and language and verbatim that I didn't get. So as a suggestion, I always strongly suggest to the parents, create a team of collaboration with your school, with your therapist, with your medical team, because the team grows in numbers and the strength grows in numbers. So adopt preschool, I'm going to go over adopt preschool, adopt the IEP, and conduct the reevaluation. So the IEP team consists of you, the parent, and the school district. And, that school district and the school of your choice, they have different representatives, right? It could be composed by the therapist, speech therapist, and this is just to name a few, right? That may vary, but there are constant individuals, and you're one of them. You can decide to adopt the EI preschool evaluation report that you bring from that preschool, or that IEP, or the IFP is also called, and implement it at the child school's age IEP, right? And really depends on the timing and the content of that evaluation. Once the team make the decision, the school district issues a notice of recommended educational placement, or by the acronym NOREP. How many of you know what the NOREP is? Let me see comments in the chat, if you don't mind. Because this is one of those languages, right, that when we start in special education, sometimes those acronyms may confuse us, or we just don't understand them. Awesome, you guys are ahead of the game. That's great. The NOREP is the form that provides the families with the opportunity to agree or disagree with the placement recommendation. So once you receive that document, there are spaces there where you can say, yes, I accept the IEP as is. No, I want another meeting, etc. And it contains that signature, and you are to return it to your school district. if we're adopting the IEP with revisions,
Carmen, can
Usually
I
the-
stop for 1 minute before you get into
Sure.
the slide? So I just want to sort of weigh in on briefly about how people feel, how appropriate do you guys think, or how useful would it be to just use the IEP that was used in preschool into kindergarten? Does that resonate with you guys? What do you guys think about that? You put in chat or just unmute. You guys have opinions on that? Okay, so Corinne says, I like the one we have for preschool and I'm comfortable using it moving forward. Okay. So it's working and you feel like that's really meeting her needs and will meet her needs in kindergarten. Okay. Anyone have any other points of view on that? No academic goals. Okay. And there are different skills that a child needs to learn and obtain, so the IEP needs to be different. And
I have another one that says we'll need to do a new IEP. Our preschool IEP does not address needs for a kindergarten class.
Right. And I really appreciate that. I really appreciate both, because there is a comfort of something that's working. But kindergarten can be very different than preschool because of new academic goals, indeed. And because the needs of the child will be different in a brand new environment. So that's just something to think about. I'm not saying one way or the other, but I want people to sort of hold in their mind the difference in these two settings and the different kind of supports that you might want to be thinking about that weren't in your preschool IEP. And then I see a few more comments. Different timing of lunch, changes in his schedule. Yes, so just a different environment and the relevance of the general education curriculum, right? Because the preschool curriculum tends to be, in a wonderful way, very inclusive and universal. And that becomes less true. There comes more deviation between the general education curriculum, perhaps, and then curriculum that may be modified or special, changed or modified or put into place differently, or even different materials. And that may become more a possibility as you move into kindergarten. So I really appreciate those remarks. Thanks so much.
And it's a good segue for us to understand this next slide, the IEP with revisions, right? Because if you now are either disagreeing or agreeing with the IEP and we're moving forward, right? There's a lot of empowerment for parents in this document. The IEP team, which is you, the parents, and that school district members, can decide to adopt it or to revise it. And all of these commentaries from earlier are good weight for that document. The curriculum is different. So if we think about IEP individualized part of it, right? That word is very significant for our child because it has to be modified according to the needs of the child to provide those resources that our child needs to adapt and move forward, and not only adapt and just be pleased, but they can meet their goals and they can exceed out their goals. The IEP team discusses the proposed revisions to the IEP, and the school district issues that NOREP for the family to agree or disagree with that placement recommendation. If we are trying to revise the document or we're not adopting the previous IEP, then the IEP team determines that a reevaluation is necessary. And the school district notifies the parent in writing that a reevaluation will be conducted. And it's important also for you to receive that document. This notification must occur within a reasonable amount of time after the parent completes the intent to register form. So that intent to register form goes in that document that you should have received by February, right? That transition meeting document and notification. The reevaluation begins with a review of the existing data. So where is the child right now, according to the professionals. And then a parent may request a reevaluation before kindergarten because of all those concerns that we just mentioned. The reevaluation report, it then is issued after it is done by the professional, and it typically summarizes data reviewed during that reevaluation, different things that the child is being prompted with and assessed with. It provides information about additional data needed, and that it's a good way for the professionals then to establish and disclose what additional resources that child may need and accommodations that those professionals, whether are the therapists or the actual educators and teachers aid or ABA professionals, can do to accommodate your child. It determines continued eligibility for special education. So it summarizes as a document that has those three parts. If a child is eligible for school-age special education, then the school district will convene that IEP meeting within 30 calendar days of the date of the report. So as a parent, I always encourage current parents of early children to keep a timeline in your calendar, make your notes, keep a journal, because it's very time bound. And as you don't see that you received the documents, is a good open door for you to have that open communication with your district, with your professionals, as well as understanding the time limits and how then your child is affected, right? Assures a smooth transition to the school age program. So because it's time bound, it really should be moving seamlessly through the process. And a new IEP will be developed and an ORIC will be issued. What can we do to prepare in advance for that transition, right? And these are some recommendations and transition strategies that we like to share with our parents. Collaborate with your EI. Right? That word collaboration, I cannot emphasize it enough. You want to create a collaborative atmosphere from the beginning. Preschool staff to create that transition plan. Schedule visiting days so you and your child can become familiarized. As someone mentioned earlier, the lunch structure is different routine, different buildings, different people, new individuals that will be introduced into the life of your child. So familiarization, depending upon the diagnosis, becomes vital, right? And sometimes even pivotal for our children, because some of our children, are very regimented in their structure, and new routines and new introductions can get them out of whack a little bit. So it's very important that you and your child familiarize with the individuals, with the buildings, with new strategies. And that also allows you to identify the needs for support. If you see the classroom or if you see the building, that can trigger your mind in being very vigilant on what your child may need as they transition into that new placement. And create your portfolio about your child to share with your child's teacher. And for that, I will leave it for Natalie. Now she has a great story about her daughter. Natalie. She's going to give you an example of her own daughter, and she has prepared something very beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Well, this is a guidebook that I actually created when my daughter was transitioning from preschool into kindergarten. Let me see if I can. Can you see it? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. You see the whole screen. So my daughter was in a private preschool setting. It was an all-inclusive setting. And then in kindergarten, I did transition her into a Catholic school. And then she actually repeated kindergarten then when I transferred her to public school, because I thought the services were a little bit better in the public school. But nonetheless, I did do this guidebook for the Catholic school and the public school. So I wanted to make sure, because I knew my daughter was going to be seen by teachers that were not special education teachers, and by just the personnel. And I wanted to be upfront with her disability. And some people were not familiar with the disability. So I wanted to make sure that people knew what Down syndrome was about. And in her, kind of like I made it sound like it was in her own words. The first thing was, about her disability, nothing to be afraid of. It's just a genetic makeup. I put lots of pictures of her, cute little pictures of baby. And I think my main point was that I wanted them to see her for who she was, and not just the disability, and not just, I guess, a document of IEP or IFSP, because she was so much more than that. So I explained what she used to do when she was a little baby. I did, she's my first child, so I took my time, and I want to take credit for that because I did teach her how to read. So now that she's in 7th grade and I have IEP meetings with her teachers, I make sure that I do tell them that, because she doesn't have coding or decoding issues right now, and she does read. So I wanted to showcase how she acts with her siblings and with her friends, her similarities and her differences, just like any other child. And then I did give tidbits and nuggets of information on how she learns best, because I think it's important to tell the teachers, okay, this is how my daughter learns better. She learns better by seeing things or by hearing things. So I was able to put this little book with good information on how she reads better, and how she sees better, and how she will learn better, talking to her slower, being patient with her, and just some I guess some good tips for the teachers and everybody that was with her throughout the day. What I did was that I created this little booklet. I went to FedEx Kinko's, back then it was Kinko's, and I bounded it with those spiral binders. And I think that I made like 10 copies. And in my first IEP meeting, I gave it to the team, and I did tell them, can you please give this to everybody that gets in touch, that is in contact with her. And I know that when I moved into the public school, I did the same thing. And teachers, a year and 2 years into the school, they would tell me, oh, this book has been so helpful. And I carry it with me in my little folder when I go and do the therapies with Mia, because she used to have occupational therapy and speech therapy and physical therapy. So they would have it in the little folder, and I guess it was helpful as a reference so that, they can even show her the pictures and talk to me about the pictures. And she would like say, okay, for example, in this one, she would talk about her time in Disney. And I just thought that it was really helpful for the teachers and for the team to know who she was outside of the school building as well. So I guess that's about it. I don't know if there's any questions or anything like that in the chat.
Hi, this is Jessie. I
Hi,
just
Jessie.
unmuted myself. I just wanted to comment. I think this is absolutely wonderful, actually. I'm actually currently fighting with the school district about my son to enter kindergarten. And essentially it was, he was a name on a piece of paper. And I think seeing the whole picture for kids with any kind of need, it is significantly huge. They're not just a name on a piece of paper. And I know that sounds crazy, but there's lots of things to look at, lots of different aspects of their needs and their changes and adaptations that they're going to need for school. And I just find this absolutely wonderful because, in my endeavor, the school, they had no idea of some of these things. And we're kind of trudging a path right now where there is no policies for these kiddos that don't meet the specific guidelines of all those other children. So I think this is wonderful. I just wanted to say that. Sorry, it was kind of long-winded.
No, thank you. Yes, and I was a little long, so I don't want to take too much time to continue the presentation. But I know that at that point, and I was very new to the whole system, and a one-pager was not enough for me to share everything that I had to say about my daughter. So it was a little booklet that I handed out in the IEP meeting. They didn't have times to review it, but then later I know that they had time, and it was helpful. I know that it was helpful.
And I see Danielle and Corinne both said they did one-pagers for their child. And I want to give a shout out to one-pagers too, because
Yes.
on the flip side, you know,
Yes.
you need it to be a quick look, you know, because teachers are overwhelmed and busy. And a one-pager can just bring an awful lot, you know, in just one look. And I think that's a fantastic strategy as well.
Yes, absolutely. And sometimes, you know, when you have IEPs, you'll have time to, in the IEP section, there's a section where you put your own, what is the parents' input. And during the meeting, you can have the time to say, excuse me, I want to talk about my kid in my own words. If you want to bring in a little clip of a video of 3 minutes, you can also bring it. I think it's important for everybody to get to know your child in your own words.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Natalie, for sharing that with us. Yeah, there's a lot of comments and chats also that you should see.
And just piggybacking on what Natalie said, I have an anecdote of I didn't do this when she was little, and for me it was a culture shock to do it, and it backfired at me because I became a little proudful due to my heritage and my background. We're very personal and we don't share a lot of stuff because we like to keep things private and confidential, right? But I needed to assimilate quickly because, as Natalie said, we need to create that team, and we're the ones that know our children best. So Natalie has done a wonderful job showcasing her daughter. So now I hand it off to Sue again. We're going to go about supporting inclusion and why it matters.
Right. And so I feel like just based on what I feel like I already know about you guys who are here with us today, we all agree that, you know, inclusion absolutely matters, that the young person or, you know, the teenager or the grown-up with a disability needs the same rights and has the same rights and requires access and choices in the community just like everybody else. And we know it is a universal human right. And the fact that we have to advocate so strongly in school for that to happen it continues to concern us. And as you know, Peel as an statewide organization, we are committed above all else to making sure inclusion happens. And we're here to make sure that does happen. Yeah, next slide. So I don't know if you guys have seen this before. It's a nice illustration of the concept of inclusion, which has changed over the years. You know, not so long ago, children with disabilities were just excluded from school. You know, when I was a child, we didn't see students with disabilities in school too often. It just didn't happen. It wasn't a law before IDEA. Segregation refers to the idea that we put children with disabilities in special schools, and they still are not part of you know, present with typically developing peers or you know, included in any way in general education. Integration, which has been done over the past 10, 20 years is that we put them in the same classroom, but we don't give them the supports they need to be fully participatory and fully included. And so the notion of inclusion is we are all the same colored dots, you know, basically in that circle, and we all have equal access to the curriculum, to a universal style curriculum, and to interaction with each other, and to just participate in all the things that students like to do. And I like the way Shelley Moore talks about this. I was hoping to take a quick look. I'm not sure we have time for the video and questions, so maybe I'll just, what we'll do, Dylan, will you remind me to send this link on to our registered people so that they can look at this video if they want. And I recommend looking at it because it's a nice talk about why inclusion matters. It's really very good talking about the concept of inclusion. But I want enough time for questions, so maybe we'll move forward and just share the video with you afterwards. Let's go to the next slide. So the rationale for inclusive education is actually a law. It is the law. It is mandated in the law of the land through IDEA. And a very important part of that law is called least restrictive environment, which you guys, I believe, already know about. We call it LRE. We're always talking about LRE. And it's the reality that we value inclusive education because it mirrors our communities, right? So people with disabilities, you know, it's natural, right, that we have people with all kinds of abilities, a range of ways of being and doing in any community. And that's true of literally any community. And so there should be no difference between systems, you know, recreational opportunities, access to churches, access to libraries for people with and without disabilities. And that is in the law too. And that's 504, section 504 guarantees that. So there are these two different laws that make sure that inclusion happens. It's been the law since 1975. And we do have resources that explain it more fully in our resources that we're going to share with you when we send out a few of those resources. And we have fact sheets also on the law and implications for public schools in Pennsylvania on the Peel website. So Dylan, if you could even just pop the Peel website into chat, that would be awesome.
So we have a question, Elisa's asking us, do you have any videos that are great examples of inclusion at school in regular education setting? In between parentheses, as an aside.
Yeah, we do. We absolutely do. And I don't have them in this presentation, but what I'm going to do is just some really great video examples is share out a link with you. I'll share it in the resources that we send to you because there's some really fantastic videos of how to do inclusive education for young children. So what I will do is make a note to myself to include some links for that in the email that will go out to you today or tomorrow, okay? There's one of the main ways that we get inclusion done the easiest is through the use of the Universal Design for Learning. And that's also a website that you can go to. If someone could quickly Google that for me, the Universal Design for Learning, and it's CAST, and put the CAST website in the chat because it gives a nice discussion about the Universal Design for Learning and how that can look in your child's school. Okay. Okay, so, yeah, and underlining the reality. Did I skip a slide? I was busy looking at other things. Yes, I didn't do this one yet. So just to be specific about the law, the LRE guarantees that to the maximum extent appropriate, school districts must educate students with disabilities in the regular classroom with appropriate aids and supports. And we know that, and our challenge is, how do we build those aids and supports into our child's plan in a meaningful way? So every IEP must first ask the question, how can this student's special education supports and services be provided within the gen ed classroom? And that is easier said than done. And that's why this has to be meaningful and not just a piece of paper. Okay, next slide. And if I see, I don't have a good view of the chat. So if any questions come up, please let me know, or just unmute yourself. And what it is not is a place. So just because your child is in the classroom with typically developing peers does not mean that they are included. And it doesn't mean that they're receiving the benefit of special education services. So because what special education is a service rather than a place. Next slide. And one of the ways that we can really make this happen, and I think a lot of times this gets skipped over. So in the IEP meeting and going through the IEP document, people sort of come up with goals that may or may not be relevant to making sure your child is fully included, right? And so the goals do have to be specific enough about what it is that you hope to see your child doing, right? So it should be something that you can say, what does this goal look like exactly? And when is it gonna happen? Like, is it gonna be in music? And is there a specific behavior you're looking for? You want to understand how the adult who's present is going to support that behavior, right? And you're going to want to make sure that it is in a social context. So it addresses the need for your child to be included. So it names an everyday routine in which all children are participating. I hope that makes sense. And it's measurable so that it's stated in a way that the child's progress can be measured. So it doesn't sound like, Tommy will not have a temper tantrum during reading. So that's not a goal, to say something will not happen is no way to measure progress. It has to be something that we can see it's happening. It's the desired behavior, and it can be measured, with its frequency can be measured over time in the same situation every time, if that makes sense, in the same learning context. It needs to be a goal that your child can reasonably expect to accomplish within, I would say, 6 months at least. I like it to be sooner rather than later. Or a year, especially young children. I want it to be attainable within the school year. Something that you don't want to have the same goal year after year. Your child isn't getting the support they need if there's always the same goal. If you come to the next IEP meeting and it's the same goal, there's a problem, because we haven't identified the supports your child needed to progress. And the goal needs to clearly lay out what your child will do to get to the point they want to get to. So that's specific language, and that refers back to the idea of specific and time bound. So we want to know. Performance criteria refers to the fact that we want to understand, within. So if a teacher does say, everybody take out your notebooks, that the child's going to do it in a given amount of time, even if that child needs more time, right? And we'll do it so many times, basically, you know, in a week, in a month, you know. So you see what I'm saying? It's very specific so that we can understand how our child is making progress. And this does take time, and sometimes we have to push for things to be done carefully like this. We don't want to let people in the meeting, because we're feeling overwhelmed, make goals for us that we don't fully understand or that don't make sense to us. Any questions around that one? Let's see if I can see the chat. No.
Questions in the
Oh,
chat.
thanks, Robin, for putting up the CAST website. That's
Can
a
I add
wonderful.
one more- Can I add one more thing?
Yes.
Hi, this is Susan. One thing parents should look for is in this needs section of the IEP, usually the need is where you pretty much get your goals from.
Mm.
And also making sure that your evaluation is so important that when you pick up the evaluation, I was told this many years ago, you read the evaluation, it clearly it tells you how your child learns about his disability. And if you feel comfortable enough, yes, they did a great job, this is my child, definitely move on. But really, it's important to have a really good evaluation that then goes into your IEP. That's just my little tidbit.
Wonderful. Absolutely. You are so right. Evaluations ideally always inform the IEP. They're not always used, you know, people don't always do the summary in a way that is useful that way, but if it can be used, that's absolutely where it should come from. And it should address what the family says the needs are, as well as the educators. So you know what your child's needs are better than anyone. And in the family concerns section, that's where it should come from there. So the supplementary aids and supports and the least restrictive environment are what inform your goals as far as making sure your child is included. You can click again. And rather than just start in a segregated or exclusionary way, or pulling out your child, whoops. Oh yeah, there you go. Or pulling your child out too often, start with 100% of the time with non-disabled peers and fight for that. There is a tendency to exclude or to dilute the time that children spend with non-disabled peers, and we want to have a good understanding and a full agreement that a child needs to be pulled out for any specific reason. And I know this gets complicated, but these are overarching goals. These are important goals. Next slide. And the whole idea of supplementary aids and supports, you know, is where it happens. And again, these are the specific strategies, as Susan had said, you know, ideally emerging from the child's evaluation, from the stated concerns of the family, and the academic goals, you know, of the school, that are supported by adults and by peers your children are with every day. So goals can involve, you know, always involve support by adults, and can also include interactions with peers. And they need to be specific about how your child will effectively communicate his or her needs. And a lot of times we miss that children, for instance, with autism, you know, as just a single example, may use different ways of communication than verbal language. Even if they do sometimes speak, it may not be their preferred way of communication. And how are we prioritizing, elevating how any given child communicates their needs? And how are we not only how do teachers understand that and support it, and even how peers are supported to communicate with your child. And then supplementary aids and services often always offer strategies about how your child will interact with others. And there's many, many ways to support that. I think I do have a video that gives an example of that. I'll try and snag that video. And also provides concrete steps about how your child is going to be included across all learning routines and activities with typical peers, and just getting real specific about that. Next slide. In Pennsylvania, they have just started calling, so supplementary aids and services are part of the IDEA language. In Pennsylvania, they're supporting the meaningful use of supplementary aids and supports through what they are now calling the Framework for Access and Belonging, or FAB, that really expands this notion of participation and active learning for children with disabilities. So I recommend that that you go into the link. If someone could pop that in the chat, I think
He already did. Dylan did.
already did. Yeah, I encourage people to go on in there and take a look at that. Okay, next slide. Okay, and I think we're just going to wrap up with the message that family involvement matters, and we know that children do better when their families are involved, whether they have disabilities or not. Next slide. You lead the way, and that's the truth. And so the family is a constant, right, in the child's life. While service providers are going to come and go, teachers are going to come and go, and it's you that is the bedrock of the way they develop and change and learn as they prepare for the future. So you are an equal partner, and you need to advocate for yourself and your family in the context of all, every IEP that you attend. Now, I do want to open up time for questions in a little bit of time we have left, but please take out your phones if you could, point them at this QR code if you could do this, because we are able to provide these kinds of presentations because of our funders, and because at this federal funding and also other forms of funding. So we'd be very grateful if you could let us know how we're doing in this job, and just fill out the few questions that are there. I
also included the QR code within the chat, and Dylan just posted the survey link.
Oh, perfect. So if you can definitely give us some feedback, we'd be very, very grateful. Okay, and so we can open up for questions. Dylan, can you turn off the recording and we can take any questions that there may be? And we can stop sharing screen as well.